So here we have the Generation 1 Shield S-01 Lance race gun. This started life as a standard gun, however I've converted it using the Shield kit to the race specification. So what I do before a competition, since having one of these myself to use in competition, I do a few checks. One of them, the first thing to do, obviously before we work on the guns, we do the normal check the gun's clear, which it is. But the first thing I do, and it's quite handy with the Shield, is there's a firing pin, retaining pin that goes through the gun from this side, actually on this right hand side, which we can push out. So it's very easy to take this out during a competition. You need, I think it's 2.5mm Allen key. So let's go ahead and take the firing pin out, and hopefully I can show you why you want to do this. This gun's been fired probably about 400 rounds, so it was spotlessly clean prior to that. This is a customer's gun that I've worked on. So let's pop out the little Allen key that retains the pin, and you do that from this side. So there's the little Allen key. I always use a little magnetic tray, keep stuff in. And then what we need to do is, while holding the firing pin in a little bit, just go the other side and through this hole here, probably with a smaller Allen key, just push that pin out. So I'll do that down here like this. Just hold the firing pin in a little bit, then we can push the cross pin out, and you can see it just pops out of this side. Now the firing pin will come out. There's the firing pin, and now you need to fish out the firing pin spring, and I found I need to check this firing pin spring, put that in there. So I don't know if you can see very clearly, but there's a fair amount, so get that into focus, there's a fair amount of crud on the firing pin. That's only after, say, about 400 rounds. So we're going to give that a quick clean up, get that pretty spotless. I use a little bronze brush, you can see how much I use it. Just give it a nice scrub off, because it's sort of a carbon type of deposit from the gun firing. So you can see now that that is actually quite clean. Give it a wipe. Make sure that's super clean. So that's ready to go back into the gun. And there's the firing pin spring. So fairly early on in my Gen 2 race gun, I actually found a firing pin spring broken, and that caused it to jam up right in the first stage of a match. So now I routinely do this to check the firing pin hole. So one of the other things you can do is, when you're at this stage, you may find either you have it for your eyelashes or probably your wife, but I find these eyelash mascara appliers, or whatever they are, for the ladies use, absolutely fantastic for clearing out the firing pin hole. So here we go, just give it a bit of a rub through, and I don't know if you can see, but it actually goes all the way through the firing pin hole itself. So that will actually clean out that hole really, really well. So I give that a couple of scrubs. And then cotton bud. You see you got a little bit of debris out of that hole. Obviously it's depositing onto the firing pin, so it's going to deposit in the hole in there as well. So now we've done that, it's a fairly simple process to put that back in. I don't lubricate the firing pin at all. Whether you want to or not's another thing, but I find that the deposit doesn't stick so much on the firing pin. So the firing pin orientation is as the retaining notch in the firing pin sits at the top in the slot, like this. So we're going to push that into the hole, and there's no force required to push this retaining pin back through. So if the firing pin's in the correct orientation, it will just go into the hole, just push it in, and then the next thing we want to do is put the grub screw back in, which retains it. These do come, when their gun is brand new, with a little bit of thread lock on them. So the first time you undo it, you might find it's quite tight. Go carefully at it. Don't strip the square heads in the top of the grub screw. It doesn't have to be madly tight, just a little bit of a tweak. That's it. So that's the firing pin hole cleaned. Now, to get the gun apart, we have on the side of the gun a couple of disassembly dots that we need to line up in order to take out the slide stop. So the first thing I do is line those up, holding it with my thumbless end, and then you can give this side a tap. I've got a nice soft head mallet I use. If you're on the range, you can use side of your magazine or something like that. And the other thing that you probably have to do, if yours is a standard race as fitted as a race by the factory, is the slide mount is actually quite low. So if you have the shield racker, what you might have to do in order to clear underneath the bottom of the sight mount is remove the racker. Because I've mounted this afterwards, I've mounted it only about 1/2 mil higher. So with this gun, this will come straight off the top of the slide like that. It comes off the receiver pretty straightforward. But that's only because I've mounted that sight very, very slightly higher than on a factory mounted gun. Now we remove the recoil spring and guide, the retaining part that fits into the front here, and now we can slide off the front end after we've taken out the little pin that goes through here. And again, shouldn't require any force to tap it, it just pushes out. So like that, it's just pushed out. Now we can slide off the barrel shroud and the front end. I know quite a few people remove this first. You don't have to. You can remove it all in one piece. Put it on one side. Now we have the barrel that just cants up, comes out of the gun this way. Before a competition, I will routinely just brush all of these surfaces where you can see there are deposits. Just give that a quick brush. Brush down the slide rails, both sides, and then give it a wipe off. A wipe in here. You don't have to go mad cleaning your gun. If you want to remove the extractor, this extractor, there is a hole here that you put a punch through, and you can punch out this little pin, come out through the bottom, don't push it that way, comes out to the bottom, and then you can remove the extractor and the little spring that sits at the back. I don't do that before every competition. I'll remove the extractor once every 1,000 to 1,500 rounds just to check it. I have had to replace 2 extractors on my gun to make the gun extract correctly. So once you're happy that you've cleaned off the breech face inside of there, also checked that in this area in here, there's a buildup of crud that you get. So I just give that a bit of a scrub out, just because it is quite hard stuff. With a dental tool, just scrape off the majority of it. You can see it coming off on the end of this. Again, don't go crazy at doing this. Just clear out the corners inside the breech face. Give it a wipe out, and really that is ready to go back onto the gun. So the next thing is the barrel, and we must make sure the chambers are clean in these guns. The chambers are particularly tight when they're delivered from the factory. I've routinely opened mine up on my race gun using a Bent's chamber reamer. This one has had the same done. So now we just use a phosphor bronze brush as you would normally, scrub around it inside the chamber, and then just rod through the barrel. I don't use any barrel cleaning solution. I'm just going to check that the rifling is now clean and the chamber is clean. And now I want to clean the feed ramp. Again, it can be quite cruddy, it could be wax from the bullet heads going up there. And I want to make sure all of that area is clean. On the breech face itself, the bronze brush on the bench, gently scrub the crud off it, and then clean off the feed ramp. This one's been polished, so it's a little better than the factory finish. That's basically ready to go back in the gun now, but because I've scrubbed a bit of crud through there, it might have dropped into the chamber. One more rod before I put it back together. Final check, nice and clean. Next thing is lubrication. A lot of people use special gun oil, I don't. But let's go back and put this together. So the first thing I do really doesn't touch the slide, but I use 10W40 engine oil. Yes, just 10W40 engine oil, no special oils. If you were carrying a gun for protection or whatever in another country, then you might use a nice fine oil that's not going to stain your clothing. Not an issue for us. We're competition shooters. We don't need to worry about that sort of thing. So let me just show you one other thing before I do put it back together. So in the Gen 1 guns, you'll see there's a little notch in the barrel, and this pin slides through the front portion of the gun. So where that hole is, you can now see, that pin goes through that hole and locates in this notch under the barrel. On the Gen 2 guns, this pin is a smaller diameter and it actually passes through a hole in the barrel, which I think is a little better. It holds the barrel more steady. I haven't seen any accuracy differences, but there is that difference. So the parts are not interchangeable, Gen 1 to Gen 2. So let's go ahead and put this back together. So I've oiled up the back end. We slide the barrel in, push it down. Now we're going to slide the front on. Now we must remember to put the pin in. Don't know how many times I've forgotten and seen that lying on my bench. So put the pin in. Again, it's a push fit, but you can see that it needs to just sit in there so it's quite flush. This is held in place by the shape of the receiver. We'll see that in a moment. Next step, before you put it back into the gun, have a look at the recoil guide. This is a plastic item. Nothing wrong with the plastic. I've not had one break yet. Just check it. I always put a little bit of lube on the guide. I don't suppose it really needs it. It's plastic. I've actually over-lubed that, but I like a little bit of lubrication on there for the spring. and this is using the black spring. So now we've prepared that, we need to put in our retainer, spring and recoil guide. Now we can push it back onto the gun, not forgetting we need to have a little bit of lubrication. So I put a few blobs into the slide rails. I like to run my guns fairly wet. I recommend you do. You can always wipe off additional lubrication. So then we locate, slide it on, and now what we need to do is, before we line up these dots at the back, we're looking for the hole in the bottom of the barrel. So let me get that off again. This one's brand new gun, so it feels quite tight. So this slide pin actually passes through the hole in the bottom of the barrel, and also the hole in here. So we're going to line that up. I realise for a lot of you this is very obvious, but if you've never taken the CZ apart before, then it might be something new. So I'm looking for the hole. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that, to show you that, but the hole in the bottom of the barrel needs to line up in here. I can see that's there, but note that it's nowhere near where these two disassembly dots are. So that's now lined up. I can push that in through the first part, like so. Now I'm going to line up those dots at the back. It'll help if I show you why. When you line up those dots, you see in here, the slide has got an open notch in it. So do that again. I'm just going to drop this through the bottom of there. Now I'm going to line up those dots on the back, and it's pushed in. That's it. That gun is ready now to be shot in competition. What I do like to do is clean my gun after a practice session before a competition. Clean it like that. Just routinely stick 10 rounds through it, just to make sure I've not missed anything and done something stupid. I'm all capable of making a mistake, so it's a good check before you go to a competition. Hope that helps.